Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Watson. I'm on the 1stGen board. I'm also the Employee Experience Advisor at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and I'd like to welcome you to Career Disruption, How to Best Prepare for a Potential Layoff. And that's a topic of increasing interest of many people for several reasons. One, I think we've all seen the level of layoffs increasing. I mean, just this week, IBM announced a layoff, and they're going to lay off approximately 8,000 employees. It was also mentioned in the last week that the VA is considering laying off approximately 80-some thousand employees. And many of you have heard about the numerous other layoffs, and CEO confidence was mentioned this morning in the conference board report that it is at a low, and that tends to lead to bad things later in the year in terms of employment as well in terms of layoffs as well. So we are very excited to have Lynn Berger, who's a licensed counselor, here with us tonight to talk about the topic of how to prepare for a potential layoff. And we want to get right to her as quickly as possible. This is a recorded session. And if you have questions, everyone's going to be on mute during this portion of the program. But if you have questions, put them in the chat. And we're going to try to make sure that we have as much time for questions as possible. But we're going to begin with Lynn's presentation. And with that, I introduce you formally to Lynn Berger.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa and Michael, for inviting me. And thank you all for attending this evening. I'm very excited to talk about this topic. I'll be touching on various elements of career disruption, and we'll have time for questions after. So let's get started here. Okay. Unfortunately, today, not literally today, but in recent times, there has been a lot of career disruption and a lot of uncertainty in our marketplace, in all across different type of fields. And you want to feel somewhat prepared for change. And for all of you, the change will vary. So I approach my work. I am a licensed mental health counselor, a national certified counselor, and a certified career counselor. And I have been working independently for over 20 years. And I look at my work from the lens of a practical and psychological perspective. Everybody comes with different questions, different backgrounds, and some it might be more practical applications, some it might be more psychological, but it really comes down to looking at it from both perspectives. So I have some techniques and things that I'd like to share with you this evening, and hopefully all of you will walk away with something. It will be very different for each person. However, I'm touching upon a lot of different elements in when someone's faced with uncertainty. And then we'll have time for questions to delve a little bit deeper if you have more specific concerns. So if you are faced with career disruption, of course, you're going to have some feelings around this. And what I have seen in my life and working with so many people over the years, it's really hard, but you need to respond versus react. Because when you react, you feel threatened, you're not making the best decisions. And for some, they might be able to really step back and give this a little bit more time than others. However, it's a shock, even if it might have been anticipated. And you need some time to reflect upon, understand what you're looking for next. And this could be an opportunity. So whenever you feel that threat, you need to take a few breaths. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail as we move through this presentation. So as you're facing career disruption, you might want to think about this as an opportunity for a better fit, a career fit. And the things that I look at and help people really step back and understand about themselves are their interests, not just skills. You're all on this call today. You're bright. You have a lot of abilities, but it's skills that you like as well as you're good at. Many of us are influenced by our education, by our family backgrounds, and pushed in areas that we just might be skillful in, but they might not be the areas you like. So this is a time to sift through that. And of course, you want to look at your values and priorities and your personality style and personality style. When you're dealing with this, there is the short term of the immediate needs, and there is that long-term perspective where maybe you can ask yourself questions more around the wants rather than just the needs. And when you go to work, you do your job, what I call your role, but you do it in a certain environment. And I don't mean XYZ company, but maybe industry, maybe small, large, startup, traditional. And maybe you need to think about this might be a time for change. And it might be time to examine that role and or environment. And of course, we can't neglect the fact that we're living in a world, there are external market considerations. So you need to take that into account. But it's really a fit between the internal and external. And I prefer to start with the internal rather than the external. I will take both into consideration, but I think it's more helpful. Now, if you are in a situation and you're facing uncertainty, you're not sure which way this is going to go, you want to get as much information as you possibly can from others, from colleagues, from professional networks outside, to get a pulse on what's going on and to be as flexible. And attitude matters a lot here. I'm not saying you have to be Pollyanna with uncertainty, but to be able to feel calm enough to have some sort of fresh perspective. And with uncertainty and with the changing marketplace, this is a great time to learn new skills. I mean, many people are uncertain about how AI is going to affect them. And I have clients in all industries because the applications are so vast that they're getting more training just to be prepared. And people are enjoying the classes as well. And with that, if you are in a position, you're not sure where it's going to go, your position, you'll be more confident to go into the changing marketplace. And I think it's really good for you to enhance your marketability and also your confidence. And for some, career disruption might be a career transition. Transitions usually happen over a period of time, but this might be an opportunity to set yourself on that course. And I think it's really important to understand that people do this. Some transitions are easier than others, but it starts with training. Well, it really starts with understanding yourself, then training, and then getting involved and learning as much as you can about a field. And the transition should include, as I said before, your interests, your motivated skills, looking at your values and priorities, and your personality style and temperament. And if you have time to respond to a situation, this is something you might want to consider. And I even had some conversations today around this where people aren't sure which way they're going to go. But they said, as I said to them, you will never regret that you didn't consider. Even if you stay in your field, the consideration of something else 5, 10, 15 years later, you'll be grateful you did that. And some people like this word, some people hate this word, but whether you're employed or you're out of work at this moment, there's so many resources and people to speak with. And we can say expand your network, whatever word you want to use, but you need to share and you need to talk with people. And you'd be surprised, unless someone has lived in a cave for the last few years or whatever, how long their career has been, they have been faced with uncertainty. The people they live with might be faced with uncertainty, family and friends. And there is a lot of support out there if you go out and try to seek it. And of course, one way to do this is old colleagues, friends, LinkedIn, which we're going to get into a little later. The premium option, a lot of people, if they are in search, get a lot out of. And the other thing that I feel is essential when one is going through some sort of uncertainty, questioning, transition, is to get involved with professional associations. I have so many stories of people that not only have gotten work, it's they've also developed relationships with colleagues in an industry. They can share their concerns. They also, if this time your job is okay, next time it might not be. It's good to get out of your own silo and go out into the world of people that have shared interests, and you can learn and grow, and it really builds your confidence. You can publish articles, you can go to conferences, and I can't state enough how not only does it help you in search or career disruption, it really helps you feel better about yourself and learn as much as you possibly can. So there is the Encyclopedia of Associations, and it's about, I mean, in the old days, it was like volumes. And there's also as simple as Google, putting in professional associations in your field. And you can get names of associations. Some of these are quite pricey, but I always say you can ask if you can join a meeting at a lower rate or as being in transition. Maybe you can even go in person if it's a local chapter of a large organization. And it's just really valuable to do this. And as I said before, I have so many people and so many stories of how people got jobs through these professional associations. It's endless. So I really, whether you're employed or not employed, it's a great way if you're employed to manage your career for the long term. And as I said before, we are in so much change and so many people are going through change. It's hard to get this started, this conversation going, but as soon as you get it started, it gets easier. And I always recommend to people, start with the people you feel most comfortable with and use it as practice. And every single person you speak to in an area of potential interest, as if they can't help you, say, do you know of a couple of people you would introduce me to or give me names? And people tend to want to be helpful more than not. And if they're not helpful, there might be a lot going on in their life. They don't have the time or energy. They might be, they can't do it right now. So move on to someone else. And you all have, you're here from a university and you've gone to separate parts colleges. There's so many ways to connect, as you're all connecting this evening with a specialty group. There's just endless ways to do this. And to get out of your own silo can also be very helpful to expand your network. Now, most of us, have been on Zoom, ad nauseum. And we're pros at this, but, practice. Go on, see your lighting, see your connection. I mean, today I had a couple of people lost connections, and they felt that they didn't check it out before, which was fine with me because I'm assisting them, but it wouldn't have been as good if they were if they were in a call with someone that they didn't want these problems. So, you can never practice enough. And as we all know, there's a lot of talk these days about storytelling. And to make your story as interesting as possible, rather than just going through a list of like, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. Think about your backgrounds and think about the things you're proud of, not just the things you accomplished, because I call them satisfying accomplishments. You might want to list out your accomplishments, but you also want to have like a column of satisfying accomplishments, and you'll speak more passionately about them. So, get out of that mindset of just what I do well. Try to think a little bit more what I do well and what I really like to do. If the opportunity is there, you'll do better and you'll feel better about yourself. And each conversation, you just don't know what's going to come of it. And usually I say it's always the people you least expect that help you. It doesn't, you put all this, some people say, oh, I can't contact this person because, they have their expectation of them is so high that they're expecting so much. And unfortunately, those are the people that might disappoint you. So you just never know. And treat each meeting or introduction as it's, a pretty important thing for you. And I mean, I don't need to probably tell a lot of you this, but follow-up is so valuable. There was some studies done about follow-up, and I am a person that totally believes in being as resourceful as possible. And I try to go at this from the quality versus quantity approach. And if something's exciting to you or you had an interesting conversation, I try to tell people, please make the most of it. Don't let it go. And follow-up is related to organization. And a lot of times when you're going through some career disruption, it's natural to, have a heightened sense of anxiety, not feeling as organized, not feeling as centered. And you really want to make sure you're taking notes on everything. And you might have an Excel spreadsheet, follow up. I said if I'm speaking with you and you might not be able to help me at this moment in time, I might say, thank you so much. I'd like to follow up with you in a month, see if things change. Now, at that point, the person is most likely going to say, fine. They're not going to say, don't call me back in a month. So you've gotten permission. You really call back in a month, and it could be very impressive to people. And I think it's key. I think it's so important. And of course, any type of thank you is, we all say thank you in different ways, and you say it in your way, but people need to feel appreciated, especially if they're going out of their way. And, the question of email or text, I follow the person's lead. If they've been texting me, I'll text them. If they email me, I'll email them. And sometimes all of us send that send button too quickly. As I said before, respond versus react, put it down for a second. And I'm a big fan of draft folders. If I write a note to someone, I put it in my draft and I go back to it and read it again. It's a good way to proofread. So I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you today. I realize that I'm touching upon a lot of points. And as I said before, we'll have some time to expand upon any of them that we spoke about. But, everyone hears about this elevator pitch. I like to call it, the elevator pitch, or just sharing a little bit about yourself. You don't have to put everything in that one introduction. You want to speak to your audience. And I'll be at the National Career Development Association, has their conference in Atlanta in a few weeks. And I'm going to be talking about this with other professionals, career professionals, about how they can best communicate with their people they work with and how they can best help them. And we really, go to that one story that is that audience you're speaking to. So you don't have to get too formulaic about this. I really think the first question you ask, who is my audience? What can I share with them that I'm proud of, that might be interesting to them, that might spark their interest, and take it from there. So this page is a little bit more traditional way to do it. However, the example I used in the bottom, it shows that I have some creativity. I rewrote something, and I did have some type of improvement in the process. But that's the message I wanted to get across. And now we'll spend a few minutes about social media in a job search. If you have any questions about what you're doing, don't do it. And I think you really all want to do some Google searches on yourself, see what comes up. If you feel it's time to enhance any parts of what you have. And, a lot of people, when they're in a time of transition, take up, a side interest. Maybe they love to write, and it might be part of their job as they move forward. And use that time to write, and maybe it'll appear on social media. I'm working with someone now who's all of a sudden they're in some sort of transition and they're doing a lot of Substack. There's just so much ways to build your skills and to have, things about you that you think might not be it to get the job, but it does give you more, someone more perspective and understand who you are. And if it's appropriate, spend time on that. It can really pay off. Now with LinkedIn, there's so much you could do, and there's so much time you could save, and so much time you could really waste. And you don't really want to go down that tunnel of just being on that all day long. I think, as I said before, I'm a big proponent of quality versus quantity. And just sitting there clicking buttons all day, I really don't think is very helpful. So I think you want to think about having some connection, having some reason for reaching out to someone, and try to build upon that as much as you possibly can. And there's a big group section on LinkedIn where you can join groups of people with like-minded interests and any type of background or things you've done. Join as many groups as you can. I want you to have people to see you for who you are, and just don't click. There's people that sit there all day and click on jobs, 100 jobs a day, and it does not necessarily work. They feel they're doing a good job because they've applied to 100 jobs, but they have absolutely nothing to do. They're really not doing the work that's necessary. And as I said before about this Google search, and expand your background. Have, use this as an opportunity. We all live in the world, and when disruption occurs, there could be panic, there could be a reaction. Everybody's circumstances are different. And if you think that change is on the horizon, one can never be too prepared. And our financial security and our financial health is important. So if you are thinking perhaps that there could be some change on the horizon, take a step back and look at your budget. And it's very interesting. If you're not happy at work or have not been happy for a while, you find that we all spend money on things that maybe if we were happier at work, we wouldn't spend so much money. So I once worked with a woman and she was so unhappy. And she would come into my office and she looked gorgeous. She was so jazzed up every time she came in. And then she ended up making a pretty hefty transition. And she moved abroad, but then she came back to the United States for a visit. And she comes into my office and she looks so different. She looked so casual. I said, "Oh, you look so, you seem so happy." And she said, and, she was the first one to say, you know, feeling happier, I didn't need to attach myself to so many things. Now, some people, things are great, but for her, she felt she really, she changed her career into something that wasn't as lucrative, but it didn't seem to matter. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, we have to look at ourselves as whole human beings. And if we're not going to take care of ourselves, who is? And it shows, especially when you're going through disruption, if you can, you really need to make sure you're taking care of yourself as much as possible. And that varies for everyone. But I've worked with people that if things took a turn for them and they were not at work, I mean, they paid attention to things that mattered and they got their health in order. They had the opportunity to exercise. They scheduled in time for things that they were neglected. And there could be like a silver lining if things change for you. I was once working with this young man, and he was in a very, very demanding field. And he had young children, and he never saw them. And then he decided, he had the time. So he started taking a class with one of the little boys. He said it was the best thing that ever happened to him. And, everybody's circumstances are different, but if you're able to see some sort of silver lining in an experience you're going through, you're going to feel better about it. And, everybody exercise is different for everyone, but we all know movement is key. To be sedentary does not work for anyone. And you want to make sure that you're finding things to do so that you can create a little bit of perspective for yourself and somewhat of a sense of time to relax and get things in perspective. And I've seen it's been quite enjoyable for some. Now, this is contrary to what many people might initially think. And I did a lot of research on this in graduate school. There are up to a certain amount of roles that one has, your stress is reduced. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're at work and you're so stressed out. You're not sure about your future. You're not sure about the organization's future. You're reading the news and it's just really very stressful. If you go home and sit by yourself and think about this all night, you're going to be more stressed than if you perhaps take a walk after work, you meet a friend, you go to a creative arts class, you go to the gym. Recently, I was working with someone, and this could get worse when you're working at home by yourself. He just found himself in this loop that he just never left that apartment for very small amounts of time. And he started to realize that that was really what was putting him down. His work was not going great, but he really made an attempt to get out most evenings and do something different. And it was amazing. And he didn't even realize this was happening to him. Because sometimes we get into these cycles and it's really hard to get out of them. So, up to a certain point, taking on a couple of roles can actually reduce your stress because it puts everything in perspective. So, here we go with the biggest topic of the day, AI. And how does this play into job search? Now, everybody, you could do whatever you want on AI. It can write your cover letters, it can write your resumes, it can tell you who to start contacting. We have to accept AI. There's a lot of benefit there. And a lot of people use it for first drafts, for letters or notes or whatever they're doing. And I think it's fine for first drafts, but I think you really need to step back and write your own letter. And unfortunately, you might think you did a great letter on AI, but it's pretty obvious that you wrote it on AI. So most people know that. I think I've talked with people that are writers, screenwriters in LA. You can use things as first drafts. I mean, there's no problem. It's an enhanced way for us to use technology and to think. But I would not get in that trap. And if you have any question about what you did on AI, put it aside and come back to it at another time. And just be really careful because you don't want to lose an opportunity because you wrote a totally AI note. It's kind of silly. Now, we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to touch basic, very, very basic on interviewing. Preparation is key. Any type of mocked interviews you could do, any type of if it's a technology, using technology, really practice because things really do blow up in people's face. And to remember that someone is hiring you for your added value, your enthusiasm and interest, and compatibility. And you really need to get that added value up front and understand what your added value is. And it also enhances your confidence. Because as I said before, you could do everything right from a practical perspective, but you also have to feel really good about it. And you have to feel somewhat good about yourself, even if if it is a low point for you. And it's also key to keep this up. You really step by step build upon your search, or whether you're working or you're not working at this point. Momentum counts. Strength grows with strength. Action leads to action. And at the end of the day, write down what you did for the day and plan your next day. Every single day, you do something around this, whether you're working, preparing for a layoff, or have been laid off. Every single day. Some days you'll do more than others, but you want to keep some sort of momentum up for whatever it is you're involved in at this point in your process. And also congratulate yourself for doing what you're doing and find an accountability partner, whether it's a professional, whether it's a friend. Don't try to do this alone. Social support is our greatest stress reducer. And as much as possible, and I know it's hard, but find ways to try to maintain a positive attitude, persistence, and patience. And there are going to be, this is not an uphill ride. It's going to go like this. and allow that to happen and have fair expectations of yourself. If there's a lot of uncertainty around you, it usually feels very uncomfortable. And try to find ways to feel you have a little bit more control over the situation. So I want to thank you all for being here, taking this evening, Thursday, a nice Thursday evening, for spending a few minutes with me and our hosts. And there's a load of information on my website, limburger.com, if you're interested. And we'll open it for questions now. So thank you all once again.
Thank you, Lynn, for a great presentation and covering a lot of topics. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask Lynn just a couple of questions that were submitted in advance, and then we're going to open it up to the whatever's been submitted in the chat. And to help with that is going to be Lisa Chapman, and she's the president and founder of 1stGenYale, and she's right there on the screen. So the first question I'm going to ask Lynn is, what is the first thing to do when you're laid off?
Well, as I said before, in any shape or form, try to respond to the situation versus react. I mean, social support is your greatest stress reducer. So I'd start, and not for job search, but people you trust and you can speak with. Start there. And you'll start working on this when you're ready. Everyone has different practical considerations, but if you can take a few moments and digest what happened, you're going to have a better result. And I know it's very hard. People's jobs are important to them from practical consideration. They're important from a psychological consideration. It's a big thing. But we want to kind of put it in perspective as much as possible.
Thank you, Lynn. Another question that was submitted, is it a good time to change a job if you plan to start a family in 1 to 2 years?
Wait, change a job or change an industry?
I would consider either one, making a change in job, obviously.
Well, 1 to 2 years is kind of a long time in this job market. So, I mean, there's a whole controversy. Should you go on an interview if you're pregnant? I mean, that's another story. But I would say 1 to 2 years, yeah, if you feel it's necessary to think about change, and there's all different kinds of change. There's step-by-step change. There could be career transition change. But I think that's a fine time horizon.
Thank you. And my last question before we transition to Lisa and see if there are questions that are new. Any advice for returning to the job market after a significant gap in your resume? How much do you need to disclose, or do you even need to disclose what you were doing during that time that you had a gap?
Well, what I think you want to do, the first thing you want to do is to be able to look at what you want to do next. And the best thing to do is, if you've had a gap, is if during that gap it's possible at all to build up your skill set. And or if you're looking for something new at that time, you can put on a resume and definitely talk about in a conversation, well, I enrolled in XYZ, even while you're interviewing. And it shows people what you're going to do for them in the future rather than what you did in the past, because you're going to work for someone for added value. So you want to try to communicate as much as your added value. And if you want to share, that's your decision, what you want to say. However, you do want to focus on what you're going to do for them. So I think to try to just beef up your backgrounds with as many skills as possible so you could speak to that.
Thank you. And Lisa, were there any questions that stood out that have come up during the presentation so far?
Yes, and we have also additional questions from the audience, and I should say I want to thank the alumni on this call and who will hear the recording. These alumni range from the classes of the 70s all the way to the class of 24. So, and they're in every profession, every career, law, business, finance, medicine. Many are in research, many are scientists in research. Many are presidents of companies and nonprofits. So we have a very broad employment profile here. And a series of questions, Michael and Lynn, are in the kind of people in their mid-50s. One question is, any advice for a mid-50s executive who has been laid off recently from a tech job?
Well, I've been doing this for a while. So I've worked through 2008. I've worked with people through the 90s. And, in the world of work, people are working longer. I worked with a couple of people recently. I'm not going to say it's dozens and dozens, but in their 60s that got new jobs. Okay, so I'm not going to be Pollyanna here. However, if you plan to be in the marketplace for a while, you have a lot to contribute. You have to look at what you have to what is the value you have, and you also have to be honest with yourself as to the field you're in and what exists in that field. I mean, I've worked with people in industries that have, through the years changed. I mean, the publishing industry when I started my career was very different than it is now. Same with journalism. So you have to take stock of what your value is and where the opportunities are in your field. And if you do need to expand upon some skills, what would someone say? I mean, 50, I don't see 50 as old anymore. But you have to feel that. You have to feel that you have something to offer. And you have to make sure check out where the opportunities are, because they change.
Lynn, related to that, another question is, my career field of education research has been destroyed. How to convince potential employers about my transferable skills, especially if looking into a different industry?
Well, you have to look at what are the transferable skills and what's the value that someone could see somewhere else. Like if you can tie an example of something you've done related to research and how you go about research and the result of your research, how would it apply to them? So, you have to understand your skills and the skills you like to use and understand where it's going to be appreciated in the next situation. But, research is a big, there's research in a lot of fields. It's challenging when your field, all of a sudden you've worked so hard and all of a sudden this field has changed. You feel a loss.
Many of our alums have work in the federal government. And can you address the massive RIFs across the federal government, especially those who are in mid-career positions? So they're age-wise, they're mid-30s, 40s, and 50s-ish, but they're not at the top, they're not at the bottom, but they're being laid off. Can you address the combination of the federal government cuts and the mid-career professionals?
Well, this is a hard question. And there are a lot of different, when you say federal government, there's a lot of different parts of the federal government. And there's people that are specializing in this right now that are devoting their careers to helping people from federal government. But I participated in a couple of conversations and seminars, and you need to take stock of what is it that you're doing? What's the content of your work and where could it be valued somewhere else? And 30s, 40s, I mean, that's not even mid-career for some people. Well, it's mid-career, but you know, people make changes and it's hard, but depending upon your skills and where would they be applicable today? I mean, I've heard some career counselors say there's plenty of jobs, they'll be absorbed somewhere, and some people are not as optimistic. But if you really understand what you can bring to the situation, it comes down to the same thing.
Okay, thank you. This is a kind of a two-part question, which you actually addressed part of it, what you do when you get laid off. But can you discuss and share how to deal with that punch in the gut of the job loss? The first immediate punch, you've lost your job, everything is in chaos. How do you deal with that emotional gut punch?
Well, when people have to deal with shock, if it is a shock, even if it's not a shock, it just might feel like a shock. You know, that's why you need to be able to, some people are on this call and it's called career disruption, how to prepare for a potential layoff. The more prepared you are, it feels like less of a shock. Yet, as I said before, it's a really bad feeling. And you feel, some might feel very, lost their ground. Do you feel you have to kind of find a way to get yourself back, find people to speak to let's try to put this in perspective and go step by step, but you have to allow yourself to feel that at first. That's why when I said respond versus react, if you like go into a tizzy and start making 22 phone calls, you're not going to be showing your best self. And everybody makes this mistake. I mean, if you speak to people that have worked for a while and gone through transition, it's a natural thing to go into that panic. It's just that you have to remember that it's not going to help you. It's hard.
Yeah. And related to that, how do you address the point of someone, or many of us, including myself, I've been through this, you're disappointed of not getting a position that you invested yourself through the process of applying. And maybe you end up being a quarterfinalist or semifinalist or finalist, but you didn't get the position, but you've invested so much of yourself, of your time, the work. Again, it's another sense of loss. How do you address that?
Well, it comes down to expectations. Okay. So you don't want to be a pessimist, but we can't have such high expectations. Even if one's putting in the work, even going through the process, like I'm going to do the best job possible, yet I don't know how this is going to go. And it's if you start with those more expectations, the blow could be easier. So when you work through the process, or if I work through the process with someone, I'm going to be as optimistic as possible and assist them and coach them and talk to them about their value. And, at the same time, either recognizing that maybe you need to, work as hard as you can on this, and also keep your eyes open for other things. And, these things go sour at the last minute more times than they don't.
And how do you deal with feelings of, oh, I didn't get the job because of my age, or I didn't get the job because of my gender, or another factor? How do you deal with that sense of looking inward, thinking it's me rather than an outside factor or many factors why I didn't get the job?
Right. So we all have our vulnerabilities. Okay. Every single person feels like there's something about them that might be, I don't know, it's not going to work. And you go in with that vision. And then if it doesn't work out, you're blaming it on that. It could have nothing to do with that. It could actually have the opposite. However, you never know when someone's making a decision. It's out of your control. And to, especially for people that are searching and feel they might have gotten to a certain age, that might not be old in in the marketplace, but they feel it. I've worked with people that are 35 years old that feel old.
Mhm.
You know, it's how you also approach, you know, life and how you look at things and how you keep your skills up to date. But you don't know why you didn't get the job. And if
Yeah.
people ask for feedback, sometimes they'll get feedback. Most times they won't. And if they get the feedback, it's probably not the right feedback. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think you have to recognize that a lot of these decisions, A, are arbitrary, and B, you know, you don't, you know, don't get down on yourself if it's a reality with who you are.
Yeah. And so other forms of discrimination or barriers, we have to kind of put them out of our head a little bit and look at many other factors.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, people are selected for various reasons, and you could have said something that you thought was perfect and it wasn't perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Okay. I love this. Which jobs will survive artificial intelligence?
Oh,
Question.
that's $1 million question. I would not answer that question. You know, I think that if you look at your subject area and things you're interested in and you couple it with AI now,
Mhm.
you'll be better equipped.
Yeah.
But I don't even think the AI experts know. We're in such a state of uncertainty, but whatever field you're in, it's good to build the skills around that with AI. You'll protect yourself that much
Well,
better.
and related to that question is a follow-up, which is what professions do you see are opening up for more opportunities for people who have been laid off or looking to make a change or looking to come back and re-enter the workforce? What do you see in the next 5 years of opportunities and potential career fields?
Well, you know, one thing that has never changed through any type of upheaval, and there's been quite a few over the last couple of decades. You know, healthcare is always one in very different aspects. You know, it's such a big field, you could do so many different things. You don't have to be the provider. And I think anything around AI now
Yeah.
is going to be you know, a valuable thing. And I have people that are in transition and they're taking these certificates, they're learning so much, they're so excited. And they'll probably be the ones that will be more successful than someone else.
Okay. Going back to the chat, Megan Wan posted for everyone. What's the opinion of activating the open to work tag on LinkedIn, which is viewable to everybody?
Yes.
Does it make you appear desperate, or is it actually helpful?
That someone asked me that question yesterday. Someone, a reporter called me on that. You know,
Thank you, Megan, for your question.
so the thing about that is I don't really talk about it with people because it just doesn't come up, like they don't ask me. And there is that, you know, you know, if it's something that you want to put up there, go for it. If it's something that's going to make you feel desperate, don't. That's the only response I could give. I haven't read any studies that that are saying anything about that. You know, there's so many other ways to like enhance your profile, enhance your connections. And you know, if you had a position and you said to present, I mean, if you said it, gave it a date, they know you're not, you know, you're not there anymore. So if you're applying to a lot of jobs, you're going to be, you know, they're going to see that action that you're open to work. So there's plenty of ways for people to realize you're open to work on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Another question in chat. For people who are maybe transitioning within a very specialized field that does require a great deal of training, professional experience, healthcare research, higher level, what do you recommend for people who want to transition in a very specialized industry?
You mean transition to a specialized industry?
Let's say they're already in the field, but they want to transition to a higher level or a higher level of performance.
Well, you know, that they need to look at what are the skills that would be above them that they don't have.
Okay.
And, you know, just because you do a certain, you're really immersed in a field, moving up doesn't necessarily mean you go more deeper in the field. It might be more, you know, strategy management and different skills.
Okay. And the last question, I'm gonna turn it over to Michael. What is your most important recommendation for anyone, including Yale alumni, who are facing potential employment layoffs, and including those of us who are still employed, but people are being laid off around us? So it's a two-part question. What's the most important recommendation if you're facing layoffs? And what do you do if you're in a department and you haven't been laid off, but people around you have been?
Yeah, I'll start with the second part of it. I mean, stress is contagious. And if other people are feeling that stress, you have to work really hard for yourself to kind of minimize that. Because it could feel it could be very hard to go to work. And even if you're not as nervous, you'll feel someone else's anxiety. And
Thank you.
the first part of the question was,
What's your most important recommendation for anyone who could be facing potential employment layoffs?
prepare with your network, prepare with your finances, prepare in any way you need to prepare. Preparation is key, makes you feel better.
Thank you. And Michael, back to you.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. This is a very important topic, and Lynn, thank you for your answers to the wide variety of questions. And I want to thank all of you who put questions in the chat and submitted questions in advance. One of the things that would be helpful to us is if you can put in the chat before we end, what information that you learned tonight that you feel you can use in the future, that would be helpful to us. And a second thing is, if we do have webinars of this type on a whole job search career management topic, what topics would you like to see? Because we do other webinars over time, and it helps to have direct input from all of you regarding what would be most important to you, what's of greatest interest. And with that, feel free to put those in the chat. And then we just want to thank you for taking time today, because we know that your broad range of experience is very important to this group. And this is a very critical time in history in terms of the uncertainty around careers. And it's not going to stop, unfortunately, anytime soon, especially with the expanding presence of AI and the impact it's going to have on careers in the next 2 to 3 years. So again, thank you very much. If you have any other questions, feel free to submit those and we will go from there. But any input that you have regarding what 1stGenYale can set up in terms of sessions in the future, please put that in the chat and we will take that in and we'll use that information as we plan future events for you. And again, Lynn, thank you very much for your time.
Oh,
Thank you, Lynn. You are fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for attending. Thank you, everyone, for organizing this. Thank you.
On behalf of 1stGenYale, I want to thank Michael for hosting this and for Lynn Berger being our wonderful professional, sharing her words of advice. And check out, we have 45 videos on career and life skills at 1stGenYale YouTube channel. So be sure to check those out. Michael has hosted many of them. So thank you, Michael. And Michael, I'll turn it back to you for final remarks.
Well, again, we want your input. Feel free to put that into the chat, and we're going to leave the channels open for you to be able to do that for the next 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And Lynn, I know, has to go to another engagement, but thank you very much, Lynn. We appreciate your time and your contributions to this group. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.